Hi, I'm Ned Downey. I was born November 9, 1931 in a small farming town known as Benjamin, Utah. I was born to Dennis Lundholm Downey and Doris Shepard Downey. I am a member of the family of 9 children. First, the oldest is Lawrence Maurice, Jimmy Dean, then me, Ned Owen, Russell Brent, Patsy Ann, Robert Dennis, Betty June, Doris Mary, and Douglas Sheridan. I was about 4 years old when we moved to Park City, which was a mining town where my father worked as a miner for about 8 years. I started school in Park City in the 1st grade. I will never forget how much trouble it was for my mother to get me to go to school. I was always trying to think up some excuse for not going to school. I could get away with it with my mother, but my dad usually could figure out all these little ideas and excuses were that I liked to stay home from school. I remember one time when I was in the 3rd grade. I used to have a habit of getting lost going to school, and I would come home and tell my mother and I'd get to stay home. One morning I tried that, and my dad, he got up and took me by the hand and showed me the way to school. He walked me all the way through town, clear down to where we got to the school grounds. I told my dad, "I can make it from here, Dad." He just kept right on walking and took me right on over to the school door. When we got to the door I said, "Well, I can make it from here, Dad." But he took me right in the building, down the hall and right into the room. He knocked at the door and the teacher opened it. My dad asked my teacher where my seat was. My teacher showed him and he took me down and sat me in my seat. Then he said, "Well, at least I know he got here this time." That's the first time and the last time my dad ever had to take me to school. Later I got to where I liked school a little bit better. We lived in Park City until about 1944. I remember when we left Park City, my dad and my older brother Jim and myself, we stayed up there a day or two after Mom and the kids came down to Santa Kin. We moved to Santa Kin. My dad Jim and I hitchhiked a ride from Park City clear down to Provo. Then we got on the old Orem or the Red Bull trolley car and rode as far as it went. It took us to Payson and we got out and hitchhiked the rest of the way to Santa Kin. This was in 1944 in September. Then we lived in Santa Kin and I went to junior high school there. I went to the 7th, the 8th and 9th grades. While I was in the 9th grade I was the class president of the school and I really enjoyed school very much then. Just to back up a bit. When we lived in Park City I remember that I had rheumatic fever and was sick, very sick for about 6 weeks or a couple of months. Then for 2 or 3 years I had to be right down in bed. I remember one time I was real sick lying in bed. I had a hospital bed and I was laying in bed and was looking out the window. It was at night and there was a big fire. We lived just a little ways off Main Street. I could see stores burning, homes, there was garages, all kinds of things. There were flames leaping up in the air. People were moving a lot of their belongings out into the street. A lot of them were afraid they were going to have to evacuate the town. It was really some fire and I remember this very vividly happening when I was a kid. I don't like fire right to this day after seeing them kind of fires in a town where houses were joining close together. Some of them built right onto each other. When we moved back to Santa Kin, I had to go back to bed that first spring with rheumatic fever again. My father bought me a little brown mare or a saddle horse. I remember it very well. This friend of mine's dad used to break horses. He was a horse trader named Jim Stanley. He rode it down to my place one day and told me it was for sale. I wanted that horse very bad. So I asked my dad when he came home from work if he would buy it for me. It was $40. He looked it over and told me to get on it and see if I could ride it. So I got on it and rode it up the street and back. I remember that he bought it for me and I was a really happy boy. I was about 13 years old at the time. About 6 or 8 months later this little mare had a buckskin colt. I was really tickled with this. I kept it and named it Sparky. We used to have a lot of fun riding horses around Santa Kin and in the mountains when I was a kid. I had several friends with horses. All the young boys had ponies to ride. This is one of the most wonderful times of my life when I look back to my childhood days. Then as I started getting a little bit older, when I was about 15, I started to dating girls. Going to shows and chasing around a little bit. I got going down to Nephi when I was about 16 years old with some friends of mine chasing girls. We'd go down to their celebration called the Ute Stampede. It was the annual celebration in Nephi. While I was down there one time I met this girl, a little, good-looking blonde girl. Her name was Carol Steele. Later I started going with her girlfriend. We had a few dates that summer. We went together a time or two. Then finally I got a date with Carol. We started going together and I fell in love with her right at first. Love at first sight you might call it. We went together, we went to movies and dances and school parties and things. We went to all these things for about a year.